wonderful Thanksgiving. Well, we will go ahead and jump in and get started. We have Sharon back with us this evening. So Sharon, if you would you conduct the roll call for me?
Sure, if I can remember how to do it. Okay, let's start with Allison Clark.
Present.
Patricia Culp. Here? No?
No,
She's
Patricia.
not. No.
Okay. Ann Phillips.
Present.
Shirley Nichols.
Shirley may not be here. We had to kind of divide it up. We had meetings that we needed to attend, and so she took one, I took the other.
Okay, I got it. I understand. Jacqueline Rainey.
Here.
Thank you. Tori Tucker.
I don't see Tori.
Okay, thank you. Chief Tyus.
Present.
Sean Billingsley.
Present.
Jerry Basin.
Present.
Ophelia Lee.
Ophelia is here. She is the on a phone call. She's the 404 number.
Okay, thank you. Hollis Turner.
Here.
Amy Taylor.
Here.
LaShawn Atwaters.
I have not seen LaShawn yet.
Okay. Sharon Williams here. LaShondra Burks.
I have not seen LaShondra Burks either.
Okay. Nicole Morado.
Present.
Chief McLemore.
Chief McLemore is also not here.
Okay. Dustin Hillis. Dustin, you here?
Yes, present.
Okay, thank you. So we've got 6 out of 18 present.
I think I count.
No, I'm sorry, 12 out of 16, 12
Yeah.
out of 18 present. So we do have quorum. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. I appreciate it. You had me for a minute there at 6.
I know.
thought
It's rough being back. It's rough. Okay.
Oh, goodness. Well, with that, we'll move into the governance section and go ahead and I'll ask for a motion, if I could, to both adopt the agenda and the minutes as a package deal, if anyone's willing to put that forward.
So moved.
Thank you, Sharon.
Second.
Thank you, Dustin. Without any objection, I'm looking for hands or voices. If there's no objection, we will go ahead and move forward. All right, with no objection, the agenda is approved and the minutes are adopted. And we can jump right on into our agenda for the evening. We have landscaping and design, as well as multi-use trail planning. I will toss to the development team now so that the presentation can begin.
All right, Lauren, you're up.
Taking lead
Okay.
this evening.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'm with HGOR and Steve Sanchez, my business partner and long-term partner here with HGOR. It will be presenting today. Bob is on another duty, but what we would like to cover is, as Allison had said, just looking at the network trail system, but then really got kind of diving into the landscape improvements that we're planning on installing and having a fresh look at that for you to review. So I'm going to share my screen and give me a minute. Share. So everybody can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So pretty much we have our master plan, which you're very, very familiar with. Not hardly anything has changed on this since the last time you saw last month. So just as a refresher, we're still good to go here. But when I talk about the trail network, what I'd like to, let me see if I can move this ahead. Sorry about that. Let's see. Sorry, guys. There we go. So we all know, we've seen this slide a while ago. Of course, our site's located here. And I just wanted to bring this up as a reminder as we start looking at the planning network of their trail system. You know, we're only about 3 miles away from the Atlanta Beltline, and we're really touching the South River Trail system. So keeping that in mind as we go and look at future networking, I wanted to just bring that back into play, that there's a lot of connectivity that we can use here that's already in place. So looking at our current master plan and also looking at the DeKalb County requirements that we're looking at right now in terms of installing, is what you see in the red is our perimeter multi-use trail, which is a requirement by DeKalb County. So we're still in the process of getting the finer details of that in place. And then your dash brown lines that you can see here are your inner trail networks, which would be a soft trail versus the concrete trail that DeKalb has requested to put in. But that network system is provided here, and eventually that will go over and have the possibility of definitely touching base to the Michelle Obama Park, as well as another whole network of systems in the park system over here. So there's a lot of opportunity here, as you know, in terms of trail network system. But before we get into that, I want to step back a minute and start talking about where we were maybe 20 years ago. And I'm going to let Steve kind of punch in here and start talking about this, because I think it's important to understand where we are with our existing tree canopy and as we're going to go and improve it.
Well, thank you, Lauren. So yeah, we wanted to look at the previous context of the site and the history of it as far as where it was with the landscape and what we were dealing with. Before we really do a design on any project, we really look at the site, we go across the site, land truth it, and just see what the present conditions are. And starting with, you can see what it was back in 1999, just 22 years ago. It was essentially denuded of all tree canopy, with the exception of this central ravine, the central draw that you see, and we have the red line circled around it, which did have some trees at the time and some mature trees, and they're specimen trees today. Next slide. So 22 years later of it being left fallow, this is essentially what we have. We have young pines in the middle. That's that dark green you see in the center of the site. That's the upland area. And then the bottomland areas where it's more of a monoculture of hardwoods, but particularly one, box elder, dominates, as you would see in an early succession land. Next slide, please. And so from the beginning of the design, we knew where the important part of this tree context was, where the real important specimen trees were. And it was this central ravine surrounding these ponds that are on site. And we did all kinds of design modifications and massaging, if you will, on the land to make sure that we preserve the vast majority. In fact, I think there was only one specimen tree that we had to impact. But of all that, we kept all the specimen trees in this central core because it really is the highest value landscape on the whole site. Next slide. And
So
here
I'll
you see,
yeah.
go ahead.
I was going to say, I'll step in here, and this is our tree protection plan, just an overview of what we had submitted with DeKalb County. And the trees that are highlighted are specimen trees, and DeKalb County is 30 inches of DBH and above for overstory and 10-inch DBH for understory. And we've had this recorded, and you can see the majority of those all within that ravine that Steve had talked about. And one area that you see there's four red trees here that will be a further discussion. And what I mean by that is that we have the perimeter walkway that DeKalb wants to put in, and that would be the area right there that we would have some impact. So as I mentioned before, the red is what the multi-use trail DeKalb County has asked us to put in, and some existing photos of that. And we're still in the process of trying to go through and understand how can we minimize conflicts with the existing utilities and trees. So that path is still in the works. And I know we had talked about with the committee to actually have a chance to go out and walk that together and try to get a feel for that. But I just want to let you know that the 4 red ones are located and identified due to the fact that we're looking at this trail. So I wanted to bring that up to speed.
So speaking of the vegetational zones, and this is in a very broad sense in the area that's being developed, we have essentially 2 zones: the upland zone, where you see the very distinct difference of the pines, and then the more bottomland species that you see in the ravine. Next slide. So we have some pictures of this area, and you can see some of the present conditions in the lower right. You see the young pines and some of the erosion that's occurred on site. Upper left, you see in certain area, kudzu has taken over, and of course that's going to be all removed in development. On the upper right, you see a mixture as we get into that floodplain area of some of those box elders, and mixed in there are a number of invasive species, as you will find in an urban context. And this includes tree of heaven, I'd say mimosa and Bradford pear were the 3 most dominant invasive trees that we found across the site. And that lower left just shows you kind of the edge of the larger forested area and the difference between the 2. Next, please. And then the bottomland, you'll see it's almost a complete monoculture of box elder, which is an early succession bottomland species. There are a few, well, as we said, the specimen trees, mainly water oaks and a few other oak species, but it's for the most part, it was a monoculture of these box elders. So, 2 of the goals that we have in this landscape is, number 1, really make sure we remove all invasive species in the areas that are being developed. And number 2, we really wanted to create more diversity out here with a native palette that's appropriate for this area. And we have several reference sites that we use across the metro area that we pick our species from and use as a guide as we do a proposed landscape. So now let's go into those proposed landscape improvements and talk a little bit on some of the details that we have in this. Next slide, please. So as I said, we're going to have almost an exclusive native palette. There will be some exceptions. Ground plane is very hard to do with natives because we just don't have a lot of good native ground covers, but almost all of the trees and shrubs are going to be of.
Nope, sorry, Steve.
Let's go back.
Yeah, sorry.
One more.
Yeah.
There we go. All right. So, and it's, we get everything from a native palette. We get diversity of an ecosystem, therefore you're going to get a diversity of wildlife, and you're also going to get aesthetics. We never give up on aesthetics, and especially with native plants, there's a lot out there, from fall color to summer flowers and evergreen foliage. So we're looking at all of these aspects, but we know that a healthy environment begins with a healthy native palette. And we're kind of setting the precedent here. We want to do this across the entire site as far as getting more native diversity, getting rid of the invasive species, and getting it back in balance to what it would be if we had never come to this land and left it in its original natural state. Next, please. So we're going to focus in on the detailed areas of the design, because that's where we have most of the diversity and most of the kind of pedestrian scale, if you will. Next slide, please. And one of the aspects that we're doing on this project is we're really breaking up the detention into smaller biodetention facilities so that each one of these can handle a smaller amount of water, and we can infiltrate it, the vast majority of it, into the landscape, into the ground, and help feed these natural creek systems that are all around us. So these biodetentions are going to be seeded with southern retention basin species. Next slide. Which includes many attractive forbs and, of course, a lot of good native grasses that can all take regular inundation. Next, please. This kind of focuses in more on that detail, the main area where we have the leadership building, the academic building. And you'll see as we go through and look at the this perspective, that gives you a feel for the canopy trees we're putting in. So some of the sustainable aspects that we're trying to do here is we're trying to recreate a good solid canopy. We're trying to get biodiversity by having a number of different species. We're using native species, so we're gonna just use irrigation to get plants established and then hopefully take everything off of any irrigation. And in so doing, we're really working with nature than working against it. Next, please. Getting into some of the detailed species that we're using a lot, several different species of oaks. Other canopy trees include black gum. We're going to get some evergreen out of American holly, sweet bay magnolia, flowering trees. We're very proud of the fact that we've actually introduced some selections of trees that are going to go on the site, like the Georgia oak. Georgia oak was not in the trade, and we wanted to get it in the trade. So we took acorns actually from Stone Mountain and actually found better, more improved in aesthetics species, and some of those species will actually go on this site. So now we have Georgia oak in the landscape palette, and we're certainly going to use it on this site. Next, please. Other canopy trees include cherry bark oak, Princeton American elm, water hickory, and tulip poplar. And then understory tree, a good understory tree is our Native American hornbeam. Next, please. We're going to do the same thing in the ground plane for the shrubs and the grasses. Use mostly native species. You can see they're just as aesthetic as non-natives, and in fact, I think more so. And yet they feed the natural environment. They feed the pollinators. They have a fruit that feed the birds, and then the insects that eat these native plants also are the protein food for the birds. So it really is restoring an ecosystem, not just restoring a landscape. Next, please.
So thanks, Steve. The one thing that we're working on, and Tony, you'll probably have some things to say here, is that next time we really want to start getting into the stables and give you a little more update on how that's planned out. But right now, the existing conditions at the stables, some of the images that you see here, which are roughly about 6 acres total for the whole facility. But by the time they've had 2 dedicated paddocks, which you can see in this aerial, which is about 3 acres to house their horses. They have an arena there that needs improvement in terms of footing. It floods often. And then their paddocks right now are underneath the high tension wires. And so we want to improve upon that. And what we're planning on looking at and dedicating this stable area is off of Key Road. And as we know, the 2 historic buildings are all going to stay. We've dedicated 5 paddock areas, and there's roughly about 8 acres now that will provide pasture for the horses. And you can see the Georgia Power easement here, which is going to be cleared anyway. So we're taking advantage of that, where we don't have to clear, and that can still have some paddock space. So that's kind of the work that we're working on next for next meeting. And this is the latest rendering of the stables. And I'll open that up to Tony if he has anything further to say. But it is eventually looking at 40 different stalls for horses, Tony?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it, Lauren. So I think the important thing to state about your talk about the paddocks is that the existing conditions didn't lead us into a advantageous environment for their horses. They have a lot of horses that do not play friendly together. So the design of the 5 paddocks works really well for them, as well as we'll have a lot of diversity to just the ground plane in the paddock. Some will be flatter than others, some will be tree covered, and we'll offer shade to others. So I think this was just kind of a teaser for next month. Stay tuned. We'll have some additional updates, and we'd like to, from here on, we'll be slowly presenting little bits and pieces here and there, but this is the basic of using the existing historic structures and cleaning them up as potential entry, clean them up eventually, as using them as a gateway into the project, and having this as something you'll be able to see from Key Road.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to end on this slide, and if there's any questions on our presentation, please, ask, and we'll be happy to answer.
Well, thank you, Steve, Lauren, and Tony, for that presentation and all of the information provided. I see Anne's hand is raised, so I will toss to Anne, and if anyone else has questions, please raise your hand as well. Matter of fact, I see Amy. So Amy, as soon as Anne finishes, the floor will be yours.
Thank you, Lauren and Steve. I just have one question. Recently, we've been noticing deer trying to cross Moreland Avenue, coming out of the homes, the yards of some of the people in the impacted area. And a friend told me she almost hit one on Key Road the other night, and she decided to just let him have the road. How are we impacting their natural habitat with the landscaping and the vegetation that you're planning to retain and to add? Will they still be able to survive, and how are we going to keep them from now invading into the residential areas? Because that's what's beginning to happen, especially with that trail that's being developed behind the old Moreland Shopping Center, and then the ones that are being apartments and all that are going to be built, and that trail behind the old Family Dollar and Papa John's. So there's a lot of invasion going on right now. Don't know where all the deer are coming from, but they're beginning to walk around in the neighborhood.
Mhm. So your question is, how do we maintain the balance of a healthy deer population, yet not so many that we hit them with our cars?
Exactly.
Boy, I wish I had the answer to that.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, this environment will not deter deer for sure.
Wow.
And I think what they use is the corridor of Entrenchment Creek, which is always going to be a natural area. And so you're always going to have them use that as a corridor to wherever they're going. They prefer mostly edge vegetation, and we're going to have woodland edge vegetation because we're going to have woodland edges. So in an urban situation, it's just difficult. It's difficult to, we're not going to do anything to encourage them, but just the fact that there's a natural wooded corridor there, they're going to be around.
Hey, Steve, if I could, just for clarity, if I'm hearing Anne's question correctly, it's more about how do we not displace them from the site versus control the population of deer.
Right. Well, I say, I don't think we're going to displace them because there's always going to be that large natural area along Entrenchment Creek, which is going to be a free rein corridor for any wildlife for sure.
Yeah, all of that is untouched. So.
And part of the trick is also in using the plant material. They're going to eat the plant material we plant. So again, it's a matter of just seeing what happens and seeing if it's an overpopulation or if it's a balanced population.
Right.
Thank you. Amy, the floor is yours.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I just wanted to go back and revisit what the subject that you started with, being the trails along Key Road. I wasn't real clear on what that was about and how what the issues are there. Because I know a lot of the residents around here, if those roadsides are going to be developed, a lot of the residents would really prefer some sidewalks or some kind of walking allowance, because a lot of people walk their dogs down there and stuff like that. So can you just kind of revisit that issue and clarify it a little bit?
Right. DeKalb County is looking at a sidewalk in the areas of the red. They're asking us to install, and it is a 10-foot concrete multi-use trail is what we're looking at. And I'm showing it on the perimeter, and the actual specifics of how that's going to lay on the land and is something that we need to walk and make sure that, you know, we can get that in there with the minimal impact that we can. And as you know, Key Road has slopes. It's got, you know, some large trees on the edge. So again, it's a work in progress, but we've got to kind of look at that together as a group.
Okay,
So it's a requirement.
great, thanks. So if I'm understanding you, there are going to be sidewalks there. It's just a matter of how do we do that?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, and then if I could just add one note to that. So Amy, if you remember that sidewalk thing, it actually, again, all sort of works out because when we first had the conversation as a CSAC, installing the sidewalks along Key Road was definitely one of the things that we heard the group express. So that, again, you don't have to walk into traffic. I think the challenge that, again, as Lauren is trying to say, is that what we're trying to balance is, of course, having to remove any of those specimen trees. And so the issue that we run into is when we install those sidewalks, there are, I think it was 3, Lauren, if I'm correct, 3 trees that will be now impacted because of the sidewalks there along Key Road. So again, we're just, obviously sharing it to share with you guys the place in which we're in, to try to make sure that we are being conscious of the environment, also putting in the sidewalks and everything in which everybody wants.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Sharon, the floor is yours. And then following Sharon, I see Hollis Turner.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. I think you guys are really hearing a lot of our concerns around the environment. So thank you for that. I do want to follow up on the multi-use trails on Key Road. So in addition to having sidewalks, and I can see you guys are trying to balance that with the 4 trees. At one point, we had talked about security cameras. Is that an option as well?
Absolutely. That's definitely one thing we have committed to, Sharon, and we have already been working, obviously, with APD every day and on the security aspect of this to develop out all of the security planning for the site. And so as part of, again, the work that we're doing with the police department and then the entire development and consulting team, they have started the work to also do the development for the whole security planning. But yes, 100% that's in there.
Okay, so, and then the other thing I just want to follow up with, again, on the 4 trees, that if someone is just doing a tree count, we know that trees are going to be taken out and a lot of them, you know, not indigenous to the area. So it's going to be a good thing. But net, are we doing just kind of a tree count of the trees that started, whether good or bad? And then, you know, if we're taking out 4 trees in one area, we're going to plant 4 more trees someplace else.
Right. I don't have the specific number involved, but we are meeting all the requirements of DeKalb.
Okay, and is there a chance that we're exceeding any of those requirements? Because there's concerns by some people, you know, in our community that some of the standards may not be high enough, and they're, you know, excited about the trees. So, is there some way we could present some kind of net number?
Sure, we can do that.
Okay, I would just like to be responsive on that.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the only other thing I would just want to comment on is Anne's comment about deer. So I've lived here now about 11 years, and we've got deer. I've had deer in my backyard all 11 years, and some of them look extremely healthy, probably because I backed up to the wetlands. But and we've got a number of deer throughout the community, and some of them eating, you know, our plants and things like that. But it's part of the balance of living in nature, and I think people who live out here understand that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sharon. Hollis?
Lauren, you mentioned, unless I misunderstood, that we were looking to have another walkthrough of the territory by us. If I understood that correctly, when did you plan on that happening?
You know, I think that we've got to collaborate in terms of when that's going to be with Marshall and, you know, how this multi-use trail is going to lay out. So I don't have an answer for that yet.
Okay.
And Hollis, I would just say that as we continue to build out the plan for the trailing system and all that good stuff. And we have been obviously having some conversations on our side, and some other folks have really agreed to step up and to help you guys as well as the APF to sort of envision what all of that stuff looks like, and to help us sort of build out that planning process. And it will be totally ongoing. And so we will definitely find a time in which we all get together and focus on that.
Okay. It just would be a lot easier to fathom everything, because I'm not an architect and I can understand some of these, but I saw the plants, they were just so beautiful, and I like to see some of the progress as we go along. It'd be easier, a lot easier for me to translate it to my people, what's actually happening there.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I think, and Steve, once you guys get to the landscaping like plan, I know you guys have, already what you're doing, but is there a point in which you guys start to grid like on, like in an actual map format, like where these actual trees go and how the plants and everything are all planted? What does that look like, so we understand?
The landscape plan, how does the landscape plan look?
Yeah, we'll have planting beds that are outlined in the field. We
Yeah.
have identified where they are, the count of those, where the trees are going to be going, and that was all part of that landscape improvements package. So what's really exciting for me, and sometimes to bring somebody out on site, is when the planting, or even before the planting starts, you get a feel for it, and we'll have stakes in the ground in terms of shrub bed here, tree here. And if that's of an interest, that might be something that could be worked in.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you for that question, Hollis. And just to kind of piggyback on that, I think it would be helpful when we do get out there to be able to visualize.
Yes.
Jacqueline, I see your hand is raised. Oh, unmute. You're still muted.
And by the way, after everything is planted, we'd be happy to give a tour of the plantings to anybody that's interested.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Lauren, can you go to that screen where you were showing the horses with the high-powered lines up over them, and you were saying Georgia Power may have to remove those? It was near the stables.
Yes.
Well, are they going to be replacing those, or do y'all plan to have all of the power lines underground?
If let me correct myself if I said something incorrectly. The power lines, what I meant to say, if I didn't, is the horses are now underneath the power lines. The power lines are always going to be there. I mean, we're not changing that. It's the opportunity to get them out from that and into their new paddock. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So will the rest of the area have underground power lines, or will they be above ground?
Rest of the development will have underground power lines. The existing power lines in that easement, though, will remain.
Yeah.
Oh,
correct.
okay.
And the
All right.
picture, just to be clear as well, the picture you're actually looking at, that's their existing location
Yes.
down near the zoo.
Right.
So they currently only have 2 paddocks, and they are currently underneath existing power lines. So it'd be kind of the same condition, but
Right.
their paddocks won't be fully underneath. It will just be their pasture area.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Sharon, I see your hand is raised. Before I circle back to you, I'd like to move to Dustin Hillis.
Hey, good evening. Sorry, I don't have video tonight. May have some questions. If you could go back to the slide that shows the trail system. Okay, so my question here, I know DeKalb County has sidewalk requirements just like the city of Atlanta does. However, when the required sidewalk doesn't really make much sense, we're allowed to give the applicant leeway in moving those sidewalks elsewhere. So I guess the 2 possible points of concern is if we're building 2 disconnected sidewalks on the south side and, we'll defer to residents as to what they want. They live in the area, but just presenting the idea of why has it been discussed or contemplated to not build those out and instead move those 2 required lengths to build out the total north side of the side along Key Road. So you have one contiguous multi-use trail.
I don't know if Alan's on board or I think he's been in negotiations with.
I can also talk a little bit about it. I know we did bring that issue up originally in discussions with them. And they were saying that the entire perimeter of our particular parcel needed to have sidewalk or multi-use trail, which we've decided, trees and lights. They did not want to trade it out for any other locations, and I think that they would, I don't know for sure that they would let us continue beyond our parcel. Alan, I don't know if you had any thoughts or had any discussions outside of that, but I know we originally talked about, is there a possibility, especially down on Constitution, where it didn't seem really logical to put sidewalks, trees and lights.
Yeah, no, Tony, you're absolutely correct. I mean, based on the Transportation Department's review, we had to have a multi-use sidewalk everywhere our property is. And also we had to have street lights added. And then we also had to have street trees. Either, what's the distance? Is it 80 feet or is it 50 feet? Or anyway, so
It's 80 feet.
80 feet. So anyway, to summarize, around that perimeter there where our development area, we're going to have a multi-use sidewalk. We're going to have street trees, and we'll also have new Georgia Power lighting there. But Councilman Member Hillis, you're absolutely right. Those areas on the south side, they're required in efforts for us to get our land disturbance permit. And if we had one time talked about taking some of that footage and taking that expense and actually moving it inside interior into the project for more trails for use by the community. But that would take not an administrative variance. I think it would take a variance we had to get voted on through the commission.
All right, well, it was worth a try, and I guess it's unfortunate they're not as flexible as the city of Atlanta is.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Great question, Councilmember Hillis. And I have something to piggyback off of that, but I see that Sharon has her hand raised. So I want to give the floor to her before I make any comments.
I did want to follow up on Councilman Hillis's comments, because as I'm looking at the map, I'm seeing 2 little red lines that are disconnected. And it doesn't seem to make sense. I think that's the area he's talking about.
Right.
And if that's something that needs to be brought to council, if the advisory committee feels strongly, I mean, because I just keep looking at the map and I'm trying to make sense of it. And I know maybe we're going to walk it through, but that doesn't really seem to make much sense, given the context of the environment. And I think we're trying to make this project make sense. And perhaps we need to explore, what it would take to change that, so that the overall planning would make much more sense. I think we have an obligation to really present some common sense so that the community could be favorable about this, because so much work has gone into this. So is this, so I need a clarification. Is this the Atlanta Council needs to rule on this, or is it DeKalb?
It's DeKalb. And what my recommendation is let's keep it as required by the ordinance and go ahead and get our land disturbance permit. And then once we kind of get out in the field and take a look at it, Sharon, then we can say, okay, these are areas that don't make any sense.
Yeah.
And so let you guys, as the committee, which has this is something y'all could take a look at. And if everybody agrees, then go forward with maybe DeKalb County, Andrew Baker, or the Planning Commission or Transportation or whatever, and propose that to them, and on behalf of the community versus more than behalf of the developer.
So Alan, I'm tracking what you're saying, and let's just put a a pin in this. Marshall, I don't know if you're tracking some of those issues or not, but I'm definitely going to take note of this. I don't want to disturb the land disturbance permit. I hear you. We need to keep things moving. But I think for all of us on the committee to kind of take note of these issues so that we can really do what's common sense. Because when we do things that don't make sense, it kind of, angers our constituents.
Yep.
Yeah. And Sharon, one last thing too. I mean, it's been over a year since we've been meeting, and all the committee's comments have been addressed and looked at, the entrance off Constitution versus Key Road, things like that. So this is just one more part of the design where you guys are looking at making recommendations. And that, like I said, let's get the permit first.
Yep.
Then we can go back and further look at this design. And if you guys want to modify it or delete it or take it and put it somewhere else, I think that's something the committee could take forward and go forward with DeKalb County.
Yeah, and so Alan, I'm really appreciative of how attentive you guys have been to all the issues that we've raised. You all have been incredibly responsive, all the engineers and consultants. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And just to sort of piggyback off of both Councilmember Hillis's comments as well as Sharon's comments, when I look at those two lines down on the Constitution Road side, in part, I can understand why the requirement is there. I mean, I get it, but I also look at the top side here up by Key Road, and I'm thinking about the fact that the Boulder Walk subdivision, we have sidewalks running to a certain point and then they stop, and then now sidewalks will come in from the other side, but they don't connect. And so, to see the pieces on the other side, yet you've got the residential piece on the other on the Key Road side. I certainly think it's a conversation worth having. And so I hope that this committee would be open to doing so, perhaps even at the next meeting, as we kind of delve a little further into this. But I also think we need to, potentially hear a little more from DeKalb County on what the logic is there. My question relative to the trail system, the soft trail system that is outlined here, can you give me kind of a little bit of a better understanding of why soft trail is chosen as the material and what that does relative to ADA compatibility?
Well, a lot of the soft trails, there was several response from the committee to have soft trails within the site. So we're trying to be as sensitive as possible. And there are soft trails that if we, and Steve, you did this at Avondale Estates, I think, if there was a product that has a binder to it, then yes, we can make that ADA compatible. It's more difficult and it's much more expensive. But a lot of that came from the committee itself.
Yeah, and the advantage of the soft trail is to have it pervious. So it's not
Pervious as
running
well.
off and causing erosion.
Right.
And it seems to be more appropriate in a really wooded area to have a soft trail versus a hard concrete pad.
And let me add one thing, this is Alan Williams again. I believe that the dotted trails that you're showing are the existing trails that are out there right now. And
Yes.
a lot of you guys, Amy and Nicole, if you've been out there walking, you can visualize those trails. So they just showed that as existing trails. If you walk through there, walking around the ponds and the dam there, they're in pretty good shape right now.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. That gives me a much better understanding. Amy, I see that your hand is up. The floor is yours.
I just wanted to make an additional comment back to the sidewalk issue. The only real reason I can think of that those lower south end sidewalks would be necessary is since they've moved the main entrance for walking traffic and people that are going to be utilizing the site for public events and stuff like that. I think those sidewalks could be important for times like that when there's going to be a lot of people visiting the site at one time. Just something to think about. That's all I have.
Thank you, Amy. I see, Councilmember Hillis, your hand is raised. The floor is yours.
Yeah, on the, staying on the trail slash sidewalk thing, so where has the main entrance been moved to? Is that the westernmost of those two non-contiguous parts or the easternmost?
Eastern.
Eastern.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, 'cause I was just gonna, even though I wouldn't get it to the main entrance, given the last point that was made, I presented the possibility of moving both of those up to the northern end of where it currently ends. But then the other possibility looks like it would be about the same. Would it be move that easternmost one to that gap in between the other one?
Right.
Both of those get you a one contiguous 10-foot multi-use trail. So just wanted to have that as an option B if we choose to go that route and ask DeKalb County for a variance or whatnot after we get the initial LDP.
Right. Yep, that's a good point.
Thank you all for those comments. Are there any additional comments or questions? I see Hollis Turner, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What are the soft trails made of? Are they just dirt that's flattened out, or is it gravel or
Or
rubber
mulch.
footage?
It's mulch.
Mulch?
Mhm.
Okay, just curious.
I think right now, as Alan pointed out, your existing trails right through the trail around the pond areas is probably just your normal forest pathway.
Okay.
Thank you, Amy.
Just, I'm curious, so you're talking about having mulch trails. Who's gonna maintain those trails? Because over time, I know trails get worn out and then, and become hazardous. So who's gonna be responsible for maintaining the trails?
Yep, I can take that one. Amy, that's definitely, again, a consideration in which we're having. And so all along as we have developed this site, we have definitely did it all in conjunction with the City of Atlanta, the Department of Enterprise and Asset Management. We've been working through on this entire site. So they've been in it every single step of the way until the maintenance conversation about the entire facility has been something that we have taken into consideration to make sure that things that we do at the site can be maintained in the most easy and efficient way for sure. So it is a thought. And again, as I mentioned earlier, when we talk about the trail portion of this, it is a conversation that we will, as a CSAC, continue to have. And again, I mentioned earlier, there are some outside folks and, outside experts that really, specialize in this, and they've built, some great, paths and belt lines and things and everything, throughout the city. So I do think it'll be an appropriate time for us to bring them into the conversation to start to help this group vision what should this really be for the community, and how do we all feel about this, and sort of get us to a consensus on what we all desire for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking just right offhand, is this going to be considered an Atlanta City park? Or is this a DeKalb County park? Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know where the lines draw here. So, yeah. Thanks for answering.
Gotcha. No problem. Thank you.
Sean Billingsley.
Yeah, my question is also about the mulch. We already know one good hard rain, a week of hard rain, the mulch is going to wash away. And for disabled veterans and anybody that's disabled, we won't be able to utilize this walking path. So why don't we just put in the money and use it like the belt line and just pave it? Because you're going to spend more money using mulch. It's just my thing. I know you all don't want to get into it, but why don't we spend the money and do what's right? Because we know the Atlanta City government will say they're going to do this and say it, and we'll be 5 years down the line before we even get to it. It's better to spend the money up front.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I will say, I don't necessarily believe it's a money conversation as to what happens out at the site. I think it's two things. I think it's number one, respect for the environment, in which is a lot of the concern in which we've heard. And then I think two, it also brings back another point about, again, the consensus of this group. Because Sean, while I hear you totally, I will tell you that when we brought this conversation up previously, and we did have conversation around this, there is a difference of opinion within the committee as to what happens out there with the trail system. So that's why I mentioned that what our goal will be is to try to do a little bit of education for the group about pros and cons of every decision in which we could potentially make out there regarding the trail system, and then sort of bring this group into some sort of consensus as to how we all feel, and something that we could all sort of make a decision about, and then totally live with the pros and cons of that decision in which we make collectively. But again, as we mentioned earlier, so don't hear the conversation about the trail being mulch as being final. This is something that, again, we do have time to sort of figure out. Obviously, as we get into the construction of buildings and things, that'll obviously be first, and then this will be the sort of back end of the project. So we definitely have this on the plan to come back to a discussion with, and we will definitely get us together at a point to make that decision.
Yeah, this is Sharon. I just want to follow up. I know earlier we had conversations around the Michelle Obama Park having the entire park being ADA, and perhaps the largest ADA park for kids, in the state. I think that's something Commissioner Johnson had said. So as we were talking about trails, we would look at it kind of holistically. So if the neighborhood park is completely ADA, how to balance this trail with the entire community need for people who really wanted it a little bit more rustic. And so I think that's something the group, as Marshall had said, when we have to like force rank what are the most important characteristics, that we would be able to look at it a little bit holistically.
Yeah, agreed.
Absolutely. And I think, part of the challenge has been that, we have two differing perspectives on this, and it may be that a portion of the trail system remains a soft trail system, while a portion of the trail system ends up being a paved scenario, especially when we talk about the connection to the Michelle Obama Park with that ADA playground.
Yes.
That's such a large feature of the park. And so you want to make sure that the very people using the trail system nearest to it have a true ability to do so. So perhaps, and I don't know what the timeline looks like for the development team or the APF, but perhaps this is something that we can revisit in the early part of 23 to, at least get the education going for this committee and for, anyone who's looking to hear a little bit more about it. And then we can go back and weigh in on how we build this out, or what we want to see.
Agree.
Got it. Totally agreed.
All right. Fair enough. Are there any additional questions relative to the development team's presentation today? All right. Well, thank you all so much for that presentation, and thank you to each and every one of you for the thoughtful questions, all things that we need to start rounding out. Now, Chief Tyus, it is your turn to be on the hot seat with the security update.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Again, thank you all for having me.
Good
But more
evening.
importantly, thank you all for your continued support of the Atlanta Police Department and the men and women of the Atlanta Police Department. Just with everything going on, we know this project would not be possible without you all support. So again, I thank you. And from Chief Shearbomb, we both give you a hearty thanks and a happy holidays if we don't see you, talk to you anymore before then. So just kind of jumping right into an update. We continue to see minor harassment from the same individuals who are targeting workers. So on November 14th, we had some AT&T workers out there conducting maintenance on their telephone poles that had absolutely nothing to do with the Atlanta Police Department or the building of the Atlanta Police Department new training facility. But we had individuals emerge from the woods and began throwing Molotov cocktails at them. Fortunately, nobody was injured in that incident, but it was just another example of them harassing innocent people out there. We also, November the 20th, I think neighbors heard a chainsaw out there and a loud explosion. We sent a couple of our supervisors out there and they had cut down like 6 trees over the roadway leading to our bomb range, which caused the power to go out in that area too. So we had to call Georgia Power out there. Fortunately, they were able to come out there, work for about 2 hours, removing trees and connecting electricity back to that area. We did go out there on November the 25th, the day before Thanksgiving. We put about 20 officers out there in the woods, cleared the woods again. We have nobody living out there right now that we're identifying. We do see them in the wood line. Every single day, we put up at least 1 drone, sometimes 2 drones per day going out there. We do locate heat sensors on some of those. Usually it's 1 or 2 in the morning, and in the afternoon, we may locate a couple of more heat sensors out there. But again, we continue to move forward with our security plan, and we're just confident that we won't have any significant delays because of these anarchists. I'll take any questions you all may have for me at this time.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions? I think I see Sharon's hand raised.
Yeah.
Or is that from before?
Oh, no, it's new. So when he said there's a few anarchists that you're seeing over and over again. So for these repeat offenders, do we bill them for the damages? Because the community is incurring a lot of cost.
Yes. So once this case comes to fruition and we get into the court system, all of that will factor in. There will be, criminal damages and financial penalties that they will incur as it relates to this.
Good to know. Thank you. Are there any additional questions?
I would just say, at the rate that they're cutting down trees, maybe we can save some money on having to do it if they're going to do it for us.
Let's hope they're invasive species they're cutting down.
Exactly.
I hope so.
Yeah, that's the concern. Are we cutting down trees that actually need to be or would even be cut down as part of this development?
Yep.
Is that part of the net number?
Right.
I have a quick question, Chief Tyus. When you mentioned sending the drone up and seeing that nobody's living on the property, but you get a couple of heat sensors there, is that specific to the Atlanta property, or do you see any of what's happening on the DeKalb property, if anyone's living on that property or not? I know that's probably a better question for me to direct to DeKalb, but
no, that is a specific Atlanta issue. However, we are in constant contact with DeKalb. They are monitoring their side of the wood line. We will be doing some joint details here in the near future to shore up that piece over there, because what happens, as you all know, is that we simply push them over to the DeKalb side of the house. So we've had robust conversation with our DeKalb neighbors and our state partners. And so in the near future, we will be having a collaborative effort to address those individuals also.
good deal. Thank you. Anyone else with any questions for Chief Tyus? All right, looks like that's it. Thank you so much for that presentation and for the update on security.
No, thank you all.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Amy's hand has gone up. You might not be off the hot seat yet. Hold on.
I knew
Go for it,
Amy was gonna be up. I knew we were gonna get a question from Amy.
Thank you. Here a couple weeks ago, there was what I was told was police training, like in the middle of the night. Woke up to hearing gunfire and whatnot, and just was wondering why that was necessary to do in the middle of the night. And I mean, I didn't know what was going on till later on, so I was very concerned that I woke up to gunfire. Can you just kind of address that for me?
Sure, Amy. So there's a need for night firing with our specialized units sometime. I apologize if that message wasn't pushed out. Anytime we're doing night firing in that area, we should be disseminating that information so that you are not woken up in the middle of the night by gunfire. But unfortunately, maybe quarterly, our specialized units go out and they practice night firing or firing with their NVGs or night vision goggles.
Okay. Yeah, I think, yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Amy, did you get the notification that went out relative to that before it took place?
I did not. I only found
Okay.
out about what was going on because Nicole posted something on our neighborhood site.
Yeah, she's the one for your community who gets the updates to share out.
Okay.
And so in theory, if we're talking about the night of the night training, I did see that message go across, but I do want to make mention to you because it could be a different incident that one of my neighbors reported to me where there was activity at night that was not Atlanta. And we, the concern in our neighborhood was that they thought it was Atlanta firing out there, and it was not. In fact, it was some folks on four-wheelers and some other activity taking place. So that, I'm not sure which day it was that you had this experience, but it may have been the Atlanta training night, which there was a notification for, and it may very well have been the other night where it was not Atlanta.
Yeah. And that's again a point that I've brought up before about the notification and making sure we get notified when to expect that kind of activity, because we do have a lot of situations like that where we don't know if it's training or if it's people hurting each other. It's hard to determine a lot of the time.
No, I agree. And again, Allison, if you are not getting the notifications, please let me know, because I want people to be confident knowing when we're out there training and when we're not out there training, so you will know when to call 911.
Yeah,
absolutely. We've definitely been getting them. And I saw Nicole on there, but at the same token, it just, I know it's all, the process is a little bit newer. So to that end, I'm sorry if you guys hear my son calling for me in the background. But no, I definitely did see the notification come out for the night training. So hopefully we can just make sure that everybody receives it and knows what's going on. Because it is startling.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks.
I see Jacqueline Rainey and then Nicole Morato.
I'm curious, the Obama Park, wasn't that heavily wooded? Are these anarchists bothering the people who are trying to do construction there like they are in this area, or what's going on there? I don't know. I hadn't heard anything about that, them having disruptions in the park.
They are having minor disruptions over there. I don't know if you saw in the news, they ended up firebombing a truck over there maybe a month or so, 2 months ago. But yeah, they're dealing with the same issues we're dealing with over on this side of it, which is why we're just going to have a concentrated effort and just pool all our resources and just address this issue collaboratively.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And just to kind of build on that, Jacqueline, a portion of the Michelle Obama Park is already cleared and raised to street height, or actually a little above street height, so you can see it really well from Boulder Crest Road. But then as it slopes down towards the creek, that area is still wooded, and then you have the property that DeKalb County used to own that is now Ryan Millsap's property, and that is still wooded, and it has the former trail there, the original trailhead, and then it is wooded, and so there's definitely activity in those areas.
Okay, thank you.
Nicole?
Yeah, I was just going to say for clarification on the notice, I didn't get the email until the 9th, and it was done on the morning of the 10th. And I have been getting them more regularly since then, but it looks like somebody included me because the first notice was sent on the 1st, but then somebody forwarded it on the 9th, and I wasn't on the first one. It was just the Boulder Walk HOA was on the notice on the 1st. So I posted it as soon as I opened the email, which was later in the day on the 9th. So, just I thankfully did get it, but making sure that we could get those on the making sure we're on that list. I think they've corrected it since then, but that was one of the little maybe cause for delay.
Absolutely. And I think that during that time is when, after the first, and I don't remember exactly which date, but that's when I asked that you be added to those emails. So of course, you didn't get the first one, but you did get the one on the 9th. And hopefully going forward, you'll get the originals as soon as they go out. But if for any reason you have any delay, keep me posted, keep Chief Tyus posted so we can make sure that you get those notifications in advance.
Yep, thanks.
Were there any additional questions? All righty, now this time for real, Chief Tyus, I do believe you're off the hot seat.
I'm not even saying goodbye this time. I'm just signing off. Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you. Well, with that, we have covered the entirety of tonight's presentation. I just want to make a quick note. We do have our next meeting coming up on December 14th, and I am going to send an email following tonight's meeting just to make sure that we are all up to date on everything that's coming our way, and make sure that we're paying attention because we have a pretty robust meeting coming forward on December the 14th. With that, if there's nothing else, I will ask to see if we can get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Sharon. Can I get a second?
Second.
Jacqueline?
Was that you, Hollis? Oh, no, Jacqueline, that was you.
Jacqueline.
Okay, gotcha. I knew that voice. Well, thank you all. And without objection, have a wonderful rest of your evening, rest of your week, and we will be seeing each other very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good night. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.